Western racism smacks you across the face, with slurs, stares, and shame served in broad daylight. In Asia, it's quieter. Think of your grandmother measuring your nose bridge, your aunt hinting you'd be prettier if you were just a shade lighter, or a family friend calling you exotic like it's charity. Here, racism doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people who love you most, from teachers who mean well, from friends offering skin lightening cream as if it's kindness. If you think Asia is too enlightened for that, think again. By the end of this video, you'll see how judgment becomes tradition, and how shame gets passed down until it feels like culture. To understand Asian racism, you first need to meet its overachieving older sibling, Western racism, the one that turned prejudice into policy and made it scalable. Contrary to popular belief, Western racism didn't start with hate. It started with logistics. Back in the 1500s, Europeans had just discovered entire continents packed with resources, and absolutely zero people willing to work for free under the blazing sun. This wasn't an ideological problem. Instead, it was an HR crisis. Africa already had established slave trade networks with the Middle East and Europe, so it was the most efficient solution. Early slavery wasn't about race. It was about proximity, existing supply chains, and, let's be honest, really good shipping rates.
I like money.
But here's where it gets interesting. You can't enslave millions of people while calling yourself civilized, without creating what marketers would call a brand consistency issue. Enter pseudoscience. Europeans didn't just enslave people, they invented entire academic disciplines to prove those people deserved it. They measured skulls like they were grading fruit. They created intelligence tests designed to fail. They published research papers with titles like "Why Africans Are Biologically Suited for Manual Labor," and somehow kept straight faces. This wasn't just university nonsense either. This thinking filtered into churches, legal systems, newspapers, and elementary school textbooks. Generations grew up believing white people were naturally destined to lead while everyone else was playing genetic catch-up. And that belief system, it became infrastructure, segregation laws, colonial governments, immigration quotas, redlining policies. Each one is just another line item in a very well-organized manual on maintaining power without having to say the quiet part out loud. So when we talk about Western racism, we're not just talking about individual cruelty. We're talking about cruelty with documentation, a system so polished and professional that it became invisible, especially to the people benefiting from it. But wait, if you think Asia was just sitting around waiting for white people to teach us how to discriminate, well, that's adorable. We were already quite advanced at judging people. We just needed better reasons. So Asia wasn't waiting for Europeans to show up before we started ranking people. We were already professionals. Before colonialism ever docked a ship, Asian societies had perfected their own systems of sorting humans into neat categories. But instead of just using race, we got creative. Birth status, occupation, skin tone, nose shape, accent, whose great-grandfather worked for whom, and whether you sounded rural when you talked. Take India's caste system. Long before the British arrived with their tea obsession and aggressive politeness, India had already created a social structure so thorough it could predict your entire life before you took your first breath. Not just your career path, but who you could marry, what you could eat, and whether people would consider your shadow hygienic. The genius of it was the marketing. Your social status wasn't random, it was karma. If you were born poor and spent your life cleaning toilets, that wasn't systemic oppression. That was cosmic customer service for something you did in a previous life. Very efficient. Meanwhile, China had Confucianism, a beautiful, organized philosophy that told everyone exactly where they belonged and strongly encouraged them to stay there. Child obeys parent, wife obeys husband, peasant obeys emperor. Step out of line and you weren't just misbehaving, you were disrupting the fundamental balance of the universe. Which, obviously, is much worse than regular misbehavior. Vietnam, Korea, Japan, everyone had their own version. Different names, same energy. A local remix of inherited status and religious morality that all delivered the same message. You can be proud of who you are, as long as you're not them. So when colonialism finally showed up, it didn't introduce hierarchy to Asia. It just gave us updated software and new categories to work with. Because here's the thing about having an existing system for sorting people. When someone suggests new sorting criteria, you don't rebel. You upgrade. When European powers arrived in Asia, they didn't look around and think, wow, what rich and complex societies with centuries of cultural nuance. They thought, great, looks like someone already installed a ranking system, we'll just update the admin settings. Colonialism didn't dismantle Asian social structures, it simply performed a hostile takeover. The British didn't abolish India's caste system, they bureaucratized it. They started documenting subcastes, cataloging ethnicities, and measuring nose bridges like they were quality controlling furniture. Suddenly, centuries of informal discrimination had official government paperwork, the Queen's stamp of approval on your inferiority complex. In the Philippines, the Spanish created a color-coded society. Lighter-skinned Filipinos with Spanish ancestry got the management positions and land ownership. Darker-skinned indigenous Filipinos got assigned to colonized peasant status. And a firm reminder not to complain about it. The Dutch in Indonesia went full corporate with it, implementing a 3-tiered racial org chart. Europeans in the C-suite, foreign Orientals like Chinese and Indians in middle management, and native Indonesians handling the manual labor. It was basically a racist restaurant menu, but with more paperwork and longer-term consequences. But here's the truly diabolical part. When the colonizers eventually left, their systems didn't. The law stayed. The schools kept teaching history through European perspectives. The idea that Western meant modern, sophisticated, and superior didn't fade when the flags changed. It just got rebranded as progress. Colonialism didn't just extract resources and exploit labor. It performed psychological surgery on entire societies. It took Asia's pre-existing obsession with hierarchy and quietly swapped out the people at the top for white faces, European languages, and British spelling. And once that logic took root in the cultural operating system, it became very hard to debug. Whiteness wasn't just a race anymore, it was an aspiration, a beauty standard, a success metric, and Asia, already trained for centuries to chase order, status, and upward mobility, was more than ready to buy the premium subscription. These centuries of colonization didn't just leave marks on maps, they left them on mirrors too. When European features became the template for intelligence, beauty, and professional credibility, Asian societies didn't resist. They adapted, optimized, and built entire industries around it. Skin whitening didn't emerge as a beauty trend. It started as career advancement. Lighter skin became shorthand for education, wealth, and social mobility. Darker skin? That meant manual labor, rural backgrounds, and being, quote, less refined. Of course, nobody markets it that bluntly. They call it brightening, glow enhancement, or radiance boosting. But the underlying message remains surgical in its precision. You'll be more successful if you look less like yourself. This is how racism gets repackaged as self-care. And it's not just skin tone. Scroll through K-pop videos, Chinese dramas, or Southeast Asian beauty influencers. The aesthetic template is remarkably consistent. Porcelain skin, narrow jaw, high nose bridge, double eyelids, minimal face size, 0 visible pores, and absolutely no indication that you've ever been outdoors without industrial strength sunscreen. This isn't beauty anymore, it's compliance. A reward system for systematically erasing anything that doesn't align with imported standards. And the most insidious part? People don't even recognize it as problematic. Ask someone why they prefer lighter skin and they'll say, I just think it looks better. Which is like saying you prefer bottled water because it tastes more natural. Nobody thinks they're participating in racism. But when an entire region agrees on beauty standards that look suspiciously European, you don't need active colonialism anymore. You've successfully colonized the mirror. But wait, it gets worse. Because once we perfected judging ourselves, we got really good at judging each other. You might assume that shared ancestry would create solidarity, that similar experiences with colonialism would build empathy, that cultural overlap would soften prejudice. You will be wrong. In Asia, similarity doesn't reduce judgment, it makes it more precise. Because the closer someone looks to you, the more crucial it becomes to establish exactly how you're still above them in the social food chain. This isn't the kind of racism that shows up in newspaper headlines or protest signs. It's quieter, more surgical, usually disguised as helpful observations or practical advice. She's a bit too dark for television. His accent sounds very provincial. Their family is from the rural areas, you know? These aren't insults, they're gentle course corrections, polite reminders of what not to be. And across the region, this pattern repeats with mathematical consistency. East Asians look down on Southeast Asians. Southeast Asians judge South Asians. South Asians discriminate against darker South Asians. And somehow, in a development that defies geographic logic, everyone finds reasons to side-eye the Philippines. It's not usually personal, but it's always directional. like social gravity pulling downward. But this isn't racism in the Western sense. It's not about hatred or fear. Instead, it's about status maintenance. And status here is a carefully calculated cocktail of skin tone, educational background, economic class, and whether your English sounds like it came from international school or YouTube tutorials. We don't say, I'm superior to you, we say, they're not quite like us. Same hierarchical result, but with better manners and fewer legal consequences. The beauty of the system is its efficiency. You don't need hate crimes or discriminatory laws. You just need a few well-placed stereotypes, consistently polite delivery, and someone just slightly lower on the ladder than you to judge. And just like that, an entire continent learns to discriminate without ever raising its voice. It's racism with good intentions and excellent customer service. The Western model was loud, obvious, and legally documented. Ours is quiet, sophisticated, and built into the fabric of daily social interaction. It doesn't need laws because it has traditions. It doesn't require enforcement because it has family pressure. And maybe that's why it's so hard to address. When your oppression comes with genuine care, when your discrimination is delivered with love, when your racism arrives with fruit and asks about your grades, how do you even begin to fight it? The answer, of course, is recognition. Understanding that polite doesn't mean harmless, that traditional doesn't mean correct, that family doesn't mean infallible. Because at the end of the day, both types of racism accomplish the same thing. They sort people into categories and convince everyone that some categories are simply better than others. The only difference is the delivery method. Western racism hits you with a hammer. Asian racism performs surgery with a smile. Both leave scars. One is just better at hiding them. So here we are. Western racism gave us the infrastructure, colonial powers provided the software updates, and we spent the last few centuries running the program so efficiently that we've forgotten we're running it at all. Asian racism doesn't burn crosses or march with torches. It doesn't need to. It operates through family dinners, beauty standards, and job interviews. It hides behind concern for your future, advice about your appearance, and suggestions for your quote-unquote improvement.